Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, the place for internet technology professionals whose work-life balance plan has imploded. We are here to provide solutions that will help the IT pro live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hi, this is Joanne Victoria, and I'm the host of the Sanity Project podcast. I partner with IT pros in the telecommunications, technology, entertainment, and mass media industries whose work-life integration plan has imploded and who want more success, more confidence, more fun, and more inner peace. The Sanity Project podcast is a platform for experts in the personal development and IT communities to share their wisdom, expertise, and solutions that will help the IT pro live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. And along those lines, our guest today is Kyle Davies. Kyle Davies is a coach, author, and trainer. He teaches people how to optimize their well-being, attain clarity of mind, and perform more effectively at work, home, and in life. Kyle originally qualified as a chartered occupational psychologist and is the creator of Energy-Flo Coaching. Kyle began his career in management consulting before moving into healthcare. Along with colleagues, Kyle pioneered a new approach for treating chronic fatigue and pain, anxiety, depression, and other stress-related symptoms, which is reflected in the recently published book, The Intelligent Body. Kyle's work offers a new understanding of the relationships between hidden stress in the body, emotional energy, and chronic health challenges. Welcome to the podcast, Kyle. How are you today?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm great, thanks. It's great to be here.
I really appreciate you doing this because it's nighttime for you and daytime.
We're expecting some snow blizzards to come in as well overnight.
Oh,
so
really?
Everything has been cancelled for tomorrow. It's interesting. They've shut all the schools already, and we haven't had any snow yet.
Nothing's happened.
Nothing's happening. It's funny in Britain. We're not set up for anything, so everyone goes into panic.
Well,
it's interesting.
They can only do what they can do, and then they'll find out how to handle whatever happens.
Exactly.
So, what I understand that you're going to be talking to our listeners today, and they include IT pros, mostly contractors and employees. And I've been attracting other people as well who like to listen to the topics that I present. And you're going to talk about two things that are really important, and then we'll probably add on to that: work stress and burnout. So how can you help our listeners overcome work stress and burnout?
Well, it's a big question, isn't it? And there's a range of answers, really. I think that it starts with very, very simple things. And certainly when you're a contractor and you're self-employed, there's every chance that you're constantly thinking about work. You're constantly engaged in either working or trying to get work. And there are at the simplest level, it is important to be in balance and to get balance. So it's important to get some of what you love in your life every day, to take breaks, to make sure you have lunch, these sorts of things. There's very simple kind of ideas like that. As we get a little bit more deeper into things, I think it's the idea that it is important to allow yourself to spend a little bit of time outside of your head and be a little bit more present in the moment. Because one of the things that is very easy to do is to be engaged in one activity and thinking about the next 6 things that you have to do. And when you're doing that, what tends to happen is you churn up a lot of emotion in your head and in your body. Tension builds. And when that tension builds in the body, it affects thinking, and it kind of shuts down thinking, and the mind becomes clogged, the mind becomes busy. And most people have had this experience. Energy levels drop, and creativity kind of goes out the window, and its performance then tends to get sort of less and less, or drops and drops and drops. So I would say that, in terms of trying to offer some simple ideas to begin with, it is allow yourself to spend a little more time in your body, be present, breathe, work for kind of shorter periods of time, and then take breaks. Go and do other things if you're able. It obviously depends on where you're working, but go and do spend some time doing things that you like, interspersed between segments of work. Because what you find is that we're actually much more effective and productive when we work a little bit less. We tend to kind of conflate the complexity of our thinking around a task, given the amount of time we have. So if you've got an hour to do something, you'll take that hour. If you've got 6 hours to do it, you'll kind of sit down for 6 hours and you'll faff around and do all sorts of things and just conflate the task and think about it a bit more. And it'll be done in 6 hours, but the chances are it's not going to be kind of 6 times or 5 times better than the version you put in after an hour. So knowing that we probably work better working on shorter periods of time, and I'm not suggesting that you do it by the clock. I suggest you probably do it by how you intuitively feel. So let yourself just have a sense of when it's a good time to work, when it's a good time to break, and when you break, go and do something you like, even if it's only for 15 minutes or 30 minutes. Those things are important. It's often the case that with full lists of tasks that we have to do, full to-do lists, it's often the case that we think, but I can't do anything I like until I've done my to-do list, until I've cleared out everything there. But in actual fact, it's much more healthy, and we can be much more productive when we, with the shorter periods, get some of what we love dispersed in there, make the weeks, and stay present rather than being fixated in the head. So those are my very brief tips to begin with.
Those are great. And I think that I know that I've always told my clients and people that I speak to, they have to put themselves first. And even if whether they have 1 hour to complete a project or an aspect of a project, or 6 hours to complete the project, that they have to put themselves in a state of physical, mental, and emotional aspects that allow them to feel good in all those areas before they attempt doing the work, in quotes. Does that make any sense?
It does. I mean, there's a natural sort of ebb and flow to life, and sometimes we feel good and sometimes we don't feel quite so good, and that can ebb and flow over the course of a day. That can be partly influenced by our natural rhythms, and I would say it may not always be possible to be feeling at your best when you are working. The thing I would say is that don't get in your way. Don't try to fix yourself. Just allow yourself to be. I think too often we probably try a little bit too hard to fix ourselves if we're not feeling absolutely 100% on top of our game, or if our mood drops. Knowing that that's completely natural and can flow through us is extremely important. But that said, it is extremely important to pay attention to how you feel. And I've worked with lots of people over the years that get so tuned out that they do everything by the clock. They eat by the clock, they go to bed by the clock. When it comes to eating, it's the same amount as they normally eat, and the only thing they do by paying attention to their body is using the bathroom. And it's interesting, but we're a very left brain culture, and that's we do tune out, and I think it's extremely important that we are tuned in to the feedback our body sends, and I think the more we can acknowledge that the feelings that we have, be they emotions, be they physical pain or whatever, they're important, or tiredness or hunger, whatever, they're important feedback signals. And you're absolutely right, we do need to put ourselves first.
Why do you think that there are people, I know I've spoken to people and I've given them similar advice, not the same, but similar, put yourself first, be calm, get into the moment, look at what you need to do, parse the activities out, and don't feel as if you have to be 100% all the time, because that's not true. You can't be on an 8-hour day and 100% at 8 hours. But what about people that or people you've spoken to who resist any of the simplest things and just want to be right about what they're doing in their life?
When you say right what they're doing about their life, what do you mean exactly?
Well, when they're firm on their own position, when they're stuck in saying, I can't do that, that's not going to work for me, I know what I'm doing, things in that nature. And, you present to them simple tasks to do, get into your body, follow the natural ebb and flow of things that are going on in your body and your mind, and they'll say, no, that's not going to work for me, I'm different.
I think that in terms of a person making a change, to a certain extent, it has to come from within. I mean, part of the way I work, I kind of describe my work as being from the inside out. I don't offer people lots of techniques as such. The vast majority of my work is about guiding people back to what I would call their true self, so the flow of who they are, because I think that the resources we have lie within us. I do think we're far too, again, as well as being very left brain in our culture, I think we're far too externally fixated. So there is a tendency to look outside of ourselves for an answer, be that a technique or a tool or whatever. So I'm my work is all about, guiding and nudging people back to their own truth. That said, again, and I think that if anyone is going to be moving towards something, they've got to have a reason for doing that. They've got to have a why, and it's not that they need to analyze or necessarily articulate that why, but it's got to feel right. So I think in order for anyone to adopt any process or practice, or move in a direction towards a goal or whatever, they need to know why they're doing it, or need to have a sense of why. And for me, that sense of why needs to be internally driven. I want to improve myself. I want to feel better. I want to feel healthier. I want to get rid of these symptoms, or I just want to perform more effectively. I want to be more creative. I think if having it kind of starts in that space. And then it's from that space, it's looking at, okay, well, what needs to happen in order to facilitate that outcome for that person. So I suppose my general view is if somebody doesn't want to do it, then if somebody doesn't want to walk the steps, then it maybe they're not ready, or they don't really want it, or something along those lines, if that makes sense.
That makes absolutely total sense, because that's the key. They have to want it badly enough in order to make some adjustments in their life. What do executives deal with right now in the workplace? I know things are changing. Everybody's trying to define or redefine leadership, communication, employee engagement, and the leaders, the executives, who mostly are leaders. That's part of being an executive, but leaders are also within a team. But what do you think? How are they dealing with the what they're confronting right now with their employees, with their workers?
So here's the big thing, and I suppose this is because this is my focus and this is what I deal with. At the end of the day, people are people. And one of the things, there's leadership and there's how can I be better at work. But the things that, everything that we do, everything that drives what we do comes from our internal state, our state of being. And it's very often the case that I think historically we've not looked at people as human beings. We've looked at them as a manager or a leader or a shop floor worker. And there are all these kind of buzzwords within a work context. And what I find is when you get behind the scenes and you get talking to people as people, they then begin to reveal the issues that are in their lives. And it's, I think it's incredibly important that we understand that how a person's life outside of work affects the person in work as well. So for me, it's incredibly important to deal with a person as a person, if that makes sense, dealing with their relationship with themselves and the way they interact with life in general. I think, all of the other stuff, there are work skills that a person can learn, but that aside, I think the big thing I find is that you might run a course on management training, and then a director or partner or top exec comes up afterwards and wants to have a quiet word, and it's normally about themselves, who they are as a person. So I think one of the mistakes that businesses have made is this kind of automated approach of treating people like a commodity, and saying, right, well, you're a leader, you should have these skills, and it doesn't really look at a person as a whole person. And that my approach, based on the experience that I've had, that ultimately people want to talk about themselves, because the problems that they have usually are not necessarily skill-based problems. Then that's an easy fix anyway. It's normally issues that they have, personal issues that relate to themselves and their feelings and how they feel about themselves, or how they feel about life, how they feel about life at home, how they feel about life in work, and those are the biggest issues. And it can often have some, it can often be connected to health and their health and concerns about health, can be connected to their levels of energy. But the fundamental piece, I think, is this need we have to look at individuals, as human beings.
And I think, I certainly agree with that. That's why you're here. One of the reasons why you're here, but we seem to be on the same wavelength. And also the issues that the workers might present to the executives, the management, the leaders, whoever they are universal. And I think that most people who have these issues of stress and family and energy and health think they're alone. And they need to
absolutely, because those are the things that are not talked about in business, are they? Because
right.
The things that are talked about are kind of possibly workload or the project, or these sorts of things. But it's all, it's very rarely actually feelings that are talked about, and what really is going on with that person. And I think, this may be one of the reasons why so many people are not happy at work. This is probably one of the reasons why in the UK, and I think it's the same in the US, the biggest killer of men under 50 is suicide. And we're seeing lots of disgruntled people, lots and lots. There are increasing numbers of people that are leaving work for one reason or another, but it's largely because they feel kind of stressed, and they're not happy. They don't feel like they're being dealt with as a human being. And I think we're kind of almost reaching a critical mass point that we can't continue in the way that we're going. Because there are far, again, it's probably the same over here as over there as over here, but there are huge issues with absenteeism, and the buzzword in the UK is presenteeism, which essentially means that people are in work, but they're not really working very effectively because they're either ill or they're stressed, or they're just not. They're not in the right space. They're not in the right kind of headspace, if you will. So there are kind of all these factors that are impacting, and the amount of money, the cost to business is absolutely huge.
I think people need to be acknowledged, as you say, as human beings. And one of the things that I do see is that bosses, in quotes, leaders, managers, supervisors are not trained with the skills that you are imparting here today to our audience. They are not taught, and you need to be taught if you don't have it instinctively within you, how to deal with people. I mean, they call them soft skills, and that's great because I think it's a great skill to have, but soft skills are so vital and no one knows them. I say no one, but my experience is people are very unhappy on the job because no one is paying attention to their personal needs, which is what you just spoke about. And
Yeah.
no one is saying, are you okay? Would you like to have a conversation? Because that relationship needs to be established at the beginning of the relationship on the job. Not, 2-3 years later say, hey, you got a problem, you want to talk? Well, you can't trust that person because the person never acknowledged you as a human being to begin with.
Yeah.
So, do you train, work with, partner with, whatever, the business in the C-suite and the managers and the leaders, or do you work with the workers?
It's both really, and working with workers, as you say, it's about empowering them. And what I mean by that is on this kind of inside out perspective of life. It's the idea that our experience of life arises from within us. So our experience is our perception, it's our creation to a certain extent. I think one of the things that often happens is that if we're in a position and we don't feel good, it's the first thing we tend to do is focus on what's going on outside of us. So we tend to blame our managers or the environment. And whilst those are valid points, if it's not possible to maneuver those, it can be important to have that recognition and that knowledge that, well, actually my experience arises within me. And it's rather than fixating on what's going on outside of me, which usually leaves me feeling disempowered and increases my sense of discomfort, I bring it back to me and look at what I can do. Because there's very often small changes that a person can make from an empowered space, because much of what we feel arises as a result of our interaction with the world around us. So, when a person is in that space and recognizes, well, actually, I can direct my experience to a degree. I'm affecting my feeling state, my mood, by the things that I do. When a person comes back to that space, rather than fixating on things that go on outside of them, they can begin to make small, subtle changes. And it can even be things like, well, just taking breaks, taking lunch, getting up and walking around, being or sort of optimizing their time and energy and being aware of how energized and balanced they feel. So there is definitely things that kind of workers can do. Obviously, in working with management and senior leaders, it's absolutely ideal if they're on board, because if they're not, things are harder without doubt. If you have an old school chief exec that just is looking at product and sees staff as a commodity that need to be kind of whipped into shape, then it is a little bit harder, which is much harder. But trying to invite those individuals who are in those positions to look at things in the slightly medium to longer term. Staff are more likely to stay, and they're more likely to perform more effectively in the medium to longer term when they're treated as human beings, when these kind of principles that I talk about are adopted and implemented. So it's a harder job. It depends on how long a person has been in business often, because if things are seen to be working, then there's not often a desire to change. But in saying that, what we know is that even though historically, we may have an organization where things have worked, it could well be the case that because the changes that we're seeing in life and the changes in the the levels of dissatisfaction and discomfort and health issues that people are experiencing at work, it may well be that continuing to adopt the same model, the same approach, the same culture, won't necessarily be fruitful in that medium to long term. So that's my approach, really. It's trying to convince leaders that if they look around them and they can see how we're seeing increasing health problems, increasing numbers of people that are disillusioned at work and not happy at work, and their productivity is going down, a different approach is needed, where the staff, the employees need to be treated and dealt with as human beings and empowered to be human and to take responsibility to a certain extent for the way they work.
There you go. All right, everybody, I want you to remember the title of Kyle Davies' book is The Intelligent Body, Reversing Chronic Fatigue and Pain from the Inside Out. You can go to his website at Energy-Flo-Coaching.com. The book is available all over. Check on Amazon first, because that's the way our business flows. And I want you to, the listeners, please refer this podcast and Kyle Davies' work to your friends, to your coworkers, while you're sitting at your desk, taking your break, listening to this podcast. Tell other people about it, because that's the best way to get Kyle's information out there. Kyle, one last question. What has been a lesson or advice that has stuck with you?
A lesson or advice that has stuck with me? Oh,
yes.
Good. That's a question, isn't it? The thing is, I've had so many lessons and pieces of advice, and I think the interesting thing about all of them is they resonate at a particular time. So, we're all on this journey, aren't we? And at certain points in time, there's something that we particularly need to hear. I think that the general piece of advice has been about being true to myself and following what feels right for me. So I was saying, I think we're a very externally referenced culture where we want to fit in, we want to do the right thing, we want to get along. And very often getting along means I need to adhere to these ideas, or I need to do this, or I need to perform in this way. And we very often just lose ourselves. So, my best advice for me, and the advice I give to my clients is, because my work is all about helping people find their way back to themselves, because their best performance, their best kind of ideas, creativity come from being themselves and allowing themselves to flow, rather than this idea of I need to learn how to do this, or I need to learn how to perform like that person over there, which is all kind of very externally focused. So the idea of the return to self idea, I suppose.
I agree. Totally. Absolutely. You're one of my other selves. Okay, people, be true to yourself. And if you would go to my website at askjoannevictoria.com, you can sign up for my newsletter, and you will receive a free copy of my book, The True Self Handbook, a guide to transform your life. Refer this podcast to others. And also on my website, you can ask me a question. There is a page there. There's a link there. You can ask me any question. You can ask me a question about this podcast. You can ask me a question about me and the work that I'm doing. But you have a way to be anonymous and ask a question and not have to call me or text me or email me. This is really simple. I want to thank Kyle Davies for being here today. And remember his book, The Intelligent Body, Reversing Chronic Fatigue and Pain from the Inside Out. And Kyle has been a great guest. And as I said, he is one of my other selves. Everybody, have a great day. Enjoy yourselves. Thanks, Kyle, for being here.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com and continue the conversation on her podcast page. And get a free copy of her book, The True Self Handbook, a guide to transform your life. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.